it's the first time I've kind of treated land as person. And then on the right-hand side is one of our precious Zhuangdi, Mama Chai, and her two apprentices, Vanessa and Mar. So they're sitting by the Guähan in Saga Katora, and they shared the value of plant medicine, and I've spent quite a bit of time in the Guähan watching them heal people. And so it's quite a special audio to have that knowledge documented in that way. As well as the objects in the painting, which are kind of hard to see, but there's pottery and jewelry from all of them as well. And then this is Nick Flores, who's one of the founders of Putahila Texan, which is the military buildup organization for the northern part of Guähan. So she does a lot of incredible activism work, and we sat and talked about what that labor looks like and how it affects her. She's sitting with her stuffed animal in her living room with shells that were from colleagues and ancestors. But yeah, I think an important note about the objects is thinking about what is like a consensual artifact. So what does it look like to be asked what you want to be remembered with, and having that being an option. So some people give me nothing, and some people give me rocks, and some people give me jewelry, and I often ask people to give me things that they can't use anymore. So it's a lot of like single earrings and worn objects. And then there's this, this sculpture, which was kind of a new project I was able to do for the Triennial, and it's composed of this cast of a boar tusk and spottless shell, which is kind of our old money shell. We have some on, and some cone shells, and then some jewelry from the sitters that were not able to fit in the painting. So there's the audio component lives in there. And
this, your mother calls this the Tata sculpture?
Yeah, so
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And I understand there's a story behind this.
Yeah, so it's a boar tusk that my Tata gave me, and it's from my great uncle from his ranch. But I've just had it around. I keep it in my house. It makes me feel close to him. And when I was working on this, I was casting them over and over again, and I had a dream of my Tata, which I haven't had many. It was the first one that was kind of happy, not that they were sad, but the rest were very serious. And he just popped up and was like, I want to go to the studio. It was like very cheerful, it was cute. And the next day I went to the studio and somebody had written Tata was here in the concrete, like right in front of the studio. It was just really like feeling his presence while I was working on that. I think it was just like spending a lot of time with that object, and I think about that in my practice of like these hidden stories in jewelry or these artifacts that we are from our own lives, and people are able to choose what they explain. So choosing how much you give of yourself to like a public sphere is an important part of the work.
So if you haven't seen her work yet, when you visit the space next door, spend some time and look closely, right? So you've got this beautiful portraiture sculpture. With the portraiture, go closer and look at the objects, because they have so much meaning, and there's stories within the story. One of the things that strikes me about your work as being very powerful is that as an artist, you are in relationship with all of these people that who are the subjects of your painting. It's almost like you're co-creating this work, but you have to be in relationship with them, and I think that sets your work apart in many ways. And I wonder if you, as an artist, we often don't know the impact that our work has on our subjects, but because you're in relationship with these women, you know the impact. can you share a little bit about what you've heard from them? I think Tyler mentioned the empowering aspect of your work. And if you can share some of the feedback and the stories about them after they've been in your portraiture.
Thank you for that question. It's always different, but I think, again, control is a really big part of it. I think about just being photographed in general, and sometimes you see a photo of yourself and you're like, oh, I don't like that. And like a painting is a very long photograph. I think about the images of Pacific Islanders in history and them not looking necessarily, it's not being done by Pacific Islanders, or them not looking happy. And I want it to be a joyful thing. I think ultimately the practice is celebratory, and I guess the feedback I've gotten from friends and past subject collaborators is that it's almost been like a sleepover vibe, because I'm thinking about like talk story and just like sharing story to keep each other safe, and also like releasing heaviness from the body and holding story collectively is kind of what the practice is about. But so for context, I'm photographing folks directly after we chat, so it's kind of this moment of release, and they're able to choose the pose and what they're wearing and what objects are there, so it's supposed to be fun. And a friend of mine once told me it was kind of like a sleepover, where you're just kind of like staying up all night and talking and sharing secrets and sharing jokes and sharing pains and like all the things that make us human, and all the parts of life, like the highs and the lows. And I think thinking about like pain or grief or violence, like you think about that moment and that action, but you don't think about, like when we watch the news and you hear about the violence, but you don't hear about the person's life, and you don't hear about what they love and what they're proud of and what the rest of the celebration of life. So really focusing on that as well. I think the conversation is very much light and art. But going back to the process of it, it's just fun. I think there's a lot of beauty in Chamorro culture as well, and Pacific cultures, like how we adorn ourselves, and like bringing that into a painting and kind of building up these layers and beautifying somebody in a way of like, the way you put jewelry on every day, or the way you put makeup on. And I think I found this process myself because it helped me heal, and I felt that I could share it with other people. So it's kind of like dressing up somebody or helping your girlfriend get ready for a night out.
Right. I really love the way, and we'll get to this topic in a minute. It's celebratory, but beneath that is the trauma and challenges that women have experienced. So I love this. The process is celebratory and really not focusing on the bad things that have happened to us, but on our resilience and strength as women. For those of you who aren't familiar with Guähan and Chamorro culture, our ancestors settled Guam and the Mariana Islands. We're part of a chain of islands around the same time the Great Sphinx of Giza was being built. So we come from an ancient society. We come from a society that is also matrilineal. And that aspect of your work really resonates strongly with me as a Chamorro woman, but also as a Chamorro woman who lives in America at a time when women's rights, respect for women, is eroding daily. We have policies at the federal level that are actually working against that. But we hold fast, as Chamorro women, we hold fast to this matrilineal culture. And if I may, I want to sort of honor that and share a poem that I wrote that was published in Yellow Medicine Review. And it's called Huetsan Famalawan, an anthem to women. And Huetsan Famalawan, Huetsan means power, the power of women. Famalawan are women. And I think your art really reminds me of this. And so as a gift to you, and a tribute to your art, I'm going to share that poem. And then I want to get into a little bit of a discussion around some of the challenges, the resilience, and the trauma and strength and celebrations of joy. So with respect for you and your work, and Out of gratitude for all of you being here, in anticipation of Mother's Day, we share this poem, Huetsan Famalawan, an anthem to women. With my breath, I speak, I sing, I chant, with breath that vibrates from powerful and ancient sounds. Finu Ilunatlata, the words of our life, the language of our people. In my breath is the collective power of CHamoru women, Huetsan Famalawan, from the first creator woman, Buuna, of Antes na Tiempo, the time before time, from our Magahaga, women of power, to generations of Manyaina, wise elders. My breath is my ink with which I craft words, words of recognition, words that heal, words that light the path for others, that clear the path for others, words that create futures. I am life, Winatla. I am strength, Minatgut. I am love, Quinaita. May we all experience love, strength, and life in our creative endeavors. And I really see that coming through your creative pieces, this celebration of life from women who have experienced some very traumatic events. And so I'd like you to speak a little bit to that, if you can.
This is Marcy for your piece. It's beautiful. I'm thinking about, I guess I'll go back to this last painting. I can figure this out. So this is actually a portrait of my mother, and thinking about her story as well as something I was present for, but also wasn't like present. So I was 5 years old, and she recorded her story of being erased from academia in the Midwest and building this Pacific Islander study program and being replaced by a white woman. And kind of, I was there and watching her experience that. There was a nationwide protest for her to keep her job, and she ultimately did not get to keep it. And I was a child, and she was just trying to take care of me. So I remember kind of a heaviness, but I didn't remember. Obviously, I couldn't understand and comprehend her experiences and the emotion she was going through. So as an adult, we sat down and had that conversation about those experiences. And this painting is in the MFA Boston, which is really cool. And her voice and her story was on loop for 2 years straight. So it was a really special thing to do that for my mother and make sure that she was heard. And everything I've learned is from her. So I think a lot of my practice and her being a sociologist built the way I work with subjects and have people sit for me, and as well as my grandparents, of the values, CHamoru values that are instilled in me, and the way we respect each other is the way I treat the work. But even thinking about the objects in this painting, there's a lot of my grandparents, like my tata's t-shirt, the 60th anniversary of independence, Guähan. It's like a collage t-shirt that he wore all the time, and rosaries and dresses and all these objects that they put a lot of love into. And she also chose to sit topless, which was a decision she wanted to make. It's thinking about our ancestors as well, as how it wasn't a sexual thing, it was it was just hot, right? But also celebrating her, and that's how she wanted to sit, this almost Serena. I'm thinking about our Serena story of this disobedient girl, right? And I can say it in a short way, but it's basically this story, our Serena story is about a little girl who didn't want to leave the ocean. She's swimming and she's having a great time, and her mom's come in and do your chores, and she doesn't want to, and she doesn't come in, and her mother curses her and says, oh, if you don't want to do your chores, then become a fish. And her grandmother saves her and says, well, leave the part of you that belongs to me, so she becomes half. So the title of this is Knowledge of in CHamoru, Knowledge of the Serena. So thinking about her going against the grain and fighting for what she believed in, and like staying true to herself and not compromising. And even though she lost something, she still had a very fruitful, or still is having a very fruitful life. So yeah, and I think thinking about the other stories, I mean, my body, the work in my practice really started about 8 years ago when I was interviewing women about domestic violence and sexual violence, kind of like starting in Detroit and in the US and the Midwest, and thinking about like releasing those stories and how so many people have similar stories, and my own process of healing from that and the importance of releasing that, and also thinking about these spaces and friends who gave me language for my own experiences, who gave me the words to like tell my own story and thus like letting me release it. And I was drawing myself a lot of the time to kind of make me feel better about something that maybe I felt like I got myself in trouble with, or was a burden, and helped me fall back in love with myself. And I was like, okay, I feel like this is something I can share. And that's why a lot of the practice is more about letting things go or holding collectively. And I think about like our big fish legend too, and like that magical net woven between women and like how it all connects us, and holding grief collectively too. You're not alone. And yeah, I think there's always like grandmothers and mothers in a lot of these works too, especially the CHamoru work. Like this is my friend Cara Flores, who runs like Mihi Kids and Protect Warm Water, and does a lot of really incredible, brilliant activism and educational work, and is a filmmaker. But her grandmother's shirt's on the side of this painting, and she's holding her grandmother's machete, she's wearing her hiking boots, and there's so many parts of us that are our ancestors, and she speaks on healing in a way that's not like for our next generation, which is like incredibly important, but a healing for your ancestors and like letting them settle. And I think that's a great, like such a blessing about my practice, I get to learn from everybody I speak with. Like, we all heal in different timelines and different ways, and listening and witnessing that and having people trust me and thinking about that knowledge as being a really important knowledge of you're never gonna learn how to heal in like undergrad or any institution. It's like between women and between loved ones and the people who care for you when you break down, and like documenting that strength.
Right, and I think also it's the, often we think that we need to heal from these traumas by ourselves. And I think, your work shows us we can do this collectively, and that we need to do this collectively. And women helping other women tell their stories is so healing and so empowering. I think the arts are a beautiful vehicle for that healing, and I think every time the story is shared, the person who experiences it, experienced the trauma, heals more in the sharing. These women are I think their voices, especially because of the audio, right? You're giving them a platform for sharing their stories. I think that people they connect to through the art, people with similar experiences can heal in the hearing, right? So there's healing in the telling, the sharing, and there's healing in the seeing and the listening. And just a great healing in this connection that we have. You spoke about our large fish story. Have to acknowledge one of my best friends who's in the audience, Michael Q. Ceballos. If you haven't seen it, Gisela shared one of our stories from Guähan, and there's a beautiful animated film that Michael directed, Maisa, the CHamoru girl who saved Guähan, and it was a collaboration with many cultural practitioners, students. It was multi-generational, a beautiful piece. It's animated, it is free. It's the first animated film fully in CHamoru, in the CHamoru language, and subtitled in English. And so it's a beautiful piece. It's often thought of as a children's film, but I've spoken to a lot of women who are in college and much older, who have found that film to be very empowering. I think Chamorro culture has a lot to offer the West, especially in this area of women's rights and just respect for women and the way we view women, and our role in society. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the role your mom has had in your art. She's like your biggest fan.
Yeah, I felt very lucky to have both my parents support me pursuing art, because I think that's not something everybody has the opportunity to. So I was able to go study art in undergrad, which was such a blessing, and to just feel their full support. I was always drawing when I was little, and my mom kind of saw it and made me go to community classes where we're at, and I was so shy, and it was like so traumatized. I was so scared. Everybody was older than me, but it was very meditative in a way. We're just doing still lives, and it was the first time I did a figure drawing, and I remember being in the 2nd grade, and she's always been creative and like taking me to museums, and also I think just being in her classes, and like the students and the community she always had around her were always very vibrant, all kinds of people, and she also just really instilled in me that I was Chamorro, and I'm very light, and I have a lot of privilege in that, but I think my culture and being Chamorro was such a big part of who I am. I love my grandparents so much, and I miss them so much, and I think what I was saying earlier of like Chamorro values and just their values of how they treated other people and how she treated other people, and respecting everybody and listening to everybody, and that really informed the way I treated art. And she was the first person who showed me a Guähan painting, and she was the first person. She's always got a new book to read, and a new person to tell me about, and she's always like a phone call away, which is really special. And I feel lucky to have such a good mom. But she's brilliant, and I think coming from that and being able to bounce ideas off of her has been such a blessing. And I know she loves you too. So.
Thank you. I love her. She's a great sister. I think you really inherited her brilliance, and also her ability to listen and to really hear. And I think that's another aspect of Chamorro culture. Listening is not passive. It's actually a skill, an active skill. It takes consciousness, and it takes will to still yourself and your mouth to listen. We were raised with this notion that the best way to learn is to be quiet and to listen. And I think that comes through in the way you listen to all of the women, and really capture what they're telling you, because you can feel it, and then it emerges in the art. And I think that's yet another aspect of Chamorro culture that could really serve America very well. We're uncomfortable. Americans are uncomfortable with silence. I work with teachers, and we have to teach them to count to 10 after they ask a question. We have to give ourselves permission to sit in silence, because we're such a culture of talkers. We're uncomfortable with that silence, but what it means is we can't listen very well. And so I really appreciate that part of your work, especially with the audio component. You're inviting us to see and also to listen. And so I encourage you, as you're engaging with Gisela's work, to listen. I think one of the most common words we all hear as Chamorro children when we're growing up is ekanok. It's an imperative. It means to listen, because it's through listening that we learn. So I invite you to ekanok, listen to her pieces, because they really are so powerful and so moving. art is healing. We've talked a little bit about that, and I want to share a little bit about, I want to share one more poem. I had the privilege of being an artist in residence at the Molokai Art Center, and spent almost 2 weeks there, teaching poetry and weaving workshops, and then spending time listening and writing. And my in my application for this residency, I said that I was really interested in using poetry as healing. And my workshops were centered around poetry and art, but the time I had by myself was really about healing. And I think that in sharing the way you share the stories of women, and the way that's been healing for both the women and for people who have similar experiences, I tried to practice that with my poetry. And so I want to share a little bit, a short poem with you. And I want to thank my family for giving me permission to share this. On December 26, 2022, my beloved identical twin, Dr. Margaret Perez Hattori Uchima, died in a tragic accident. She drowned while she was in the ocean. She was swept beyond the reef in Alupang Cove on Guam. We were 57 years old. We were identical in virtually every way as children, but as twins grow up, you start to look different. Our voices remained identical. We were echoes of each other. In fact, I hear her voice, especially when I'm mentoring students and staff, when I'm saying things that I know she would have said in her role as a teacher of the School of Health and Nursing at the University of Guam. So I wrote a poem while I was in Molokai, and it's done in the style known as echo verse or echo poetry, where the end of one line is echoed in the end of the following line. And I share this because this is one of the most traumatic events that I've experienced, and your work actually was part of the inspiration for me, because I thought these women are sharing traumas that they've been through, and they've achieved healing. And prior to this, writing this poem, I had never actually talked about the day of her death. And so I share that now because it's, I think, an experience many of us can connect with. And it's also a way for me to practice healing, and hopefully it provides some healing for some of you. Shattered is my grieving heart, poetry, my healing art. She's missing at sea, news and a morning call, followed by hours of prayer. Dread overtook all. She died, caught in a rip current. In a moment, my soul was rent. Words I don't wish to hear. Surely the gods or merciless fates trick my ear. I refuse to believe, shouted, they must be mistaken. Sadly, cruelly, it's true, from us she was taken. No, you can't be gone. With the living you belong. No, 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 my wails tortured long. Death has riven us apart. Poetry, my healing art. In deep distress, I shared my long black hair, a small sacrifice, my twin. The sea has robbed you of air. In the coffin you lay so still, so cold. Young, never more to age as I alone grow old. Sorrow then stormed in, clouded my brain. The funeral was marked by torrents of rain. It's one of the stormiest days we had on Guam. Waves of mourners pass by. I too feel sea swept. I rode beside you in the hearse as the heavens wept. Weeks later at your interment, I feel you in the breeze. Heard echoes of you say, be still, I am at ease. Be still, I am at ease. Heavy is my grieving heart, poetry, my healing art. following your work for years, and listening to the stories really gave me, in Molokai, gave me the courage to actually talk about that and share that. And the poem emerged, and it really is a good form of healing. I'm more committed to using poetry as a way of achieving healing, but also encouraging other people to use art as a means of healing. And I wonder if you can speak a little to that topic and how your art has helped you to heal.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really beautiful. It's an honor. But yeah, I think sharing my own story, I think about the first recording I ever did, and like of myself, and how scary that was. I think I was in undergrad, and it was like I was still very much in the thick of the emotions and processing everything, and I tried to tell my story into like this Zoom recording. I was sitting in my car in the back of my apartment because I didn't want to be around anyone. It's a mess. And I don't know where that recording is. I'm sure I could find it. But I think the feeling of getting it out, and like, even if your voice shakes, like saying something that's true, kind of releasing it from like bouncing around inside of you. Because if you hold on and you're so tense about things, it can literally make you sick. And at the same time, I was starting to share these stories with not even just friends, but people with similar experiences. And yeah, I think speaking things is really powerful, because when you put words into the world, they bounce around and you never know who's going to hear them and who's going to connect. And even with art too, you don't know who's going to walk up to something and look at it and find their own connections to something, and find their own meaning, and connect their own story and their own dots and their own stars to something. So it's bigger than just us and just your own story, and that doesn't make your own story is so important too, but to find that people will hold it collectively too, and to find, I think, gives me a lot of hope in humanity as well, of like, oh, people will help you if you're struggling. And I think it's easy in this world to just try to carry all of your grief alone. And I think about our ancestors too, World War II, and all of the grief they experienced, and that a lot of them didn't get the opportunity to tell their stories and to release that. And I think being an artist and a creative person is really incredible, because in a way it's having a voice, and it's not exactly, in poetry too, it doesn't have to be like a clear black and white story. It's not linear. You have these ways to navigate it, that you can express yourself and release something in a way that feels safe, maybe, or feels brave, or feels a little more nuisance than like, and I think about making, especially with the topics I was working with like maybe making a police report, or doing something like that that's more like cut and dry. It could be re-traumatizing to have to tell your story in that way, and to tell your story in a way that it's your choice, and you do it when you're ready. So thank you for sharing your beautiful poetry as well, because again, it helps other people. And I think that was a lot of the reasons I started sharing my own narratives too, because I thought about the young women around me and wanting to protect them. And you share knowledge to keep other people's navigation safe, right? Like, oh, there's a rock right there, or that there's avoid this area, avoid this person. It's not in a way of like, oh, canceling somebody. It's really just about safety, and making sure somebody's ride is smooth, and not just smooth, that they can enjoy their lives and flourish.
So beautiful. It's wonderful. Thank you. And I want to open the floor. I think we have time to take a few questions. Questions, comments, feedback for Gisela?
Yeah, thanks, Gisela. Love your work, and I'm curious, do you have any other pieces on display here in Honolulu that we can see other than the ones here at the museum? And then what's the direction of your art moving going forward?
I do not have any more work in Honolulu. I wish I did, but maybe in the future. Direction-wise, lately I've been, everywhere I go I do interviews. So after opening the Triennial, I went to Guam, and I was actually kind of focusing on interviewing scientists, and specifically Chamorro scientists who have a relationship with the land and that deeper connection with protecting our coral reefs. And I was interested in how, thinking about the history of nuclear testing in the Pacific, how the ocean healed faster than the land, and what kind of knowledge we can pull from that for ourselves. And like you were saying, there's so much knowledge in the Pacific and Guam that I think would be really helpful to the rest of the United States and the world, and thinking of, there's so much going on in the world right now. And I think the exciting part for me using voice is being able to funnel so many brilliant people from Guam to New York or spaces I'm showing, and really get our voices and people heard. Because I think even there's a slide that I didn't talk about, my friend Siobhan is a brilliant writer, and thinking about these knowledges that deserve to be in the Turtle Island, and also growing up in the Midwest and nobody knowing what Guam was, and it being a US territory was always a bit frustrating. So these are very collaborative, the paintings feel like collaboration because people are gifting me stories. So yeah, I'm working on collecting these stories from scientists, which has been really lovely. I had a quick trip to Guam after this, and I was doing a lot of collecting specimens and trying to make paint out of soil, and thinking about letting the land speak a little bit more. I think about our jungles and how sacred they are. That's a big component in a lot of the work. I'm also thinking about the way painting women's bodies is more of a feeling to me, because I know what it feels like to be in a woman's body, and it's an experience. There's a lot of things that happen, and feeling the weight of that and what it's like to move through spaces, and thinking about the jungle of how does it feel to be in the jungle. And it's not necessarily painting it realistically, but painting it as a feeling of being inside of it. I don't know if that answered your question. But
Yeah,
you're
thank you.
a master storyteller, so I'm really looking forward to that, seeing how that direction opens up and is expressed. It would be a great voice for the environment, for the ocean, for the land. Great question. Other questions or comments?
Hi, I'm a really big fan of your work. I really admire your use of mixed media and using personal objects within your work, and incorporating all the stories behind that as well without necessarily having to use words. What are some of your favorite objects that you've received to include in these pieces?
Thank you for your question. I think I'm actually painting you right now, so there's been a lot of objects that have been really fun. You in particular just gave me wisdom teeth, which has been exciting to me, and there's been a few people who've given me teeth in the past. I was talking to Tyler and a few people at lunch about this, and thinking about bone artifact in Guam and the history, the way we use bones, and the spears and all of the ways. Yeah, and thinking about having DNA in a painting is really cool, but kind of having that be a ode to our culture as well. And also, you can't separate you from the painting now. You're literally in it. But what else? I love, there was a painting in Detroit that I did, and while I was there, a lot of people I painted in the past would give me jewelry for the next person, which I thought was really beautiful, act of gift giving. And a friend of mine gave me a diamond earring from when she was a baby for somebody else's painting that she wasn't even close to, and I thought that was really special. Of like, and thinking about these like talisman objects as protection, and gifting something to somebody you don't even really know that well to protect them, I think speaks to the way we protect each other in community sometimes too. Thank you for your question.
So beautiful, I love that.
It's such a tiny earring, and I always point it out, but and that's the fun thing about the objects, is they have these stories you will never know. And I think about indigenous cultures and knowledge as well, and how it's not always appropriate to share all of our knowledge, and what do you keep for yourself. So like these secret objects that maybe just the people in the paintings know, or their families.
I think that sort of imbues the art with sanctity, right? And we also often think of objects as commodities, possessions, and so I love that aspect of your work, that there is this element of sacredness, and it's not just a sacred bond between you and the subject, but there are these little sacred spaces within the paintings and within these objects. I really love that aspect of your art. Other questions? Comments? I see some of my students here, but I won't call on them. I really want to.
I was just wondering, so here at HoMA, the audio component is embedded within the sculpture, and is that how generally you include audio with your works, or what are some of the ways that you incorporate that in with the painting?
Thank you. There's been a few ways, and this was really exciting to work on that sculpture. I think it was I was doing a podcast with Noelle yesterday, and I was talking about how, that dream with my grandfather, it felt like this triangle brought me closer to my ancestor in a way, which was really precious. But I've done all kinds of things. I think it depends on the space. A group show with audio and sound is always something you have to figure out. You can't just blast sound into the other person's install. So I really started with doing motion sensor paintings in the beginning, and it was kind of this process to give a painting a personal boundary. So if you didn't want to listen to me, or you didn't want to listen to my friend, you have to step back. You have to give it space. And there's all these little objects and all these things that you're gonna want to look at, but you don't get the full picture if you don't want to listen. And I think that came from, thinking about having my own personal space and this lack of control when you put something out into the world of like, how do I make sure, and especially a lot of them being nudes, it's like, how do I make sure that these people are respected? And that was kind of a mechanism I created to make sure they're heard, like given boundaries and personal space. And I think ultimately the work, I hope that people interact with it and walk out into the street and respect other people's boundaries in a different way, or kind of make people aware of boundaries. I think the word boundaries is thrown around a whole lot, but it's a literal boundary. But I'm always kind of weaving the audio together, so it's everybody's stories coming together. If I'm doing like a solo or a group show, or if it's a body of work, and then each painting has an individual track as well. So they all have their own story, and then the way, if it's for an installation, or depending on the idea for the show, playing with how the sound install goes.
Aloha. So thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed. I had this hour of talking to Gisela for the CPIS podcast, Oceanic Currents, which hopefully will come out in a few months. But I guess I wanted, because we talked about this a little, and she will go nameless here, but someone in the room came up to me when she heard that you would be in the Triennial, and just expressed a lot of pride to have a CHamoru artist in the Triennial. And I just, maybe to give you a chance to talk about what does that feel like to have so many people kind of look up to you, and this burden that you might sometimes carry with being the only CHamoru visual artist in the room, or in the show, or in the museum, or in the continent. And how does that feel? And maybe are there ways in which you've opened up pathways with other artists, maybe collectives, ways that we can community build and support one another?
Thank you. I think that was a really lovely part of our conversation the other day. It really makes me think of a conversation I had with another Native artist in Turtle Island, and we were having this two-part interview, and she was talking about how oftentimes you suddenly become the whole representer for your whole culture, and it's very humbling, and you're also simultaneously learning your culture. I feel very, of course, I've grown up in the diaspora. I don't look that CHamoru, and I feel not fully worthy to be the only CHamoru artist in the room. A lot of the times, I think Guam visual artists deserve so much more visibility, and there's a lot of people painting. There's also there's not an art supply store on Guam, and accessibility to creating is there, but they still create, and there's still so much brilliance and so many important ideas happening. It's far, right? It's hard to get, we were just speaking on this like right before we got on the stage, it's hard to get eyes there. And I was already in the United States, right? So I've had a lot of people open doors for me and support me. But yeah, it can be heavy, and I don't always feel worthy. But I think being CHamoru has been such a huge component to shape my practice and my life and everything that I do. And I'm really proud to be CHamoru, and it's such an important part of my life. I love Guam. But yeah, it's humbling, and it's scary sometimes, and like I'm not always going to pronounce things correctly, and thinking about our language as well, of how like my mother doesn't speak CHamoru, and she's learning CHamoru, right? And she wasn't able to speak CHamoru when she was a child. My grandparents spoke CHamoru, and they would talk about us, and, like gossip about us, and be like, "Oh, they're bad," and tell secrets. But yeah, I think there's a lot of parts of like my generation too that are doing really cool language work, and watching that happen. I think there's also a lot of amazing writers on Guam, and kind of these mediums that aren't necessarily just visual art, and I hope to see more visual artists from Guam in Hawaii and in Turtle Island and in Europe, and to tell our stories, because there's so much knowledge about everything, about how to treat each other and how to survive and how to navigate. So I'm just like a little part of that, and I feel very lucky and honored too.
And I want to thank the Triennial organizers. The installation really helps with this problem of representation. So yes, Gisela is the only CHamoru visual artist, but the way the art has been presented and installed is really a collective, right? It represents the collective. And you really feel that when you go into the space where your art is. And I really love the way that happens, and where you're allowing, she's one CHamoru, but think of all the CHamoru women that you're seeing in these art pieces. So when I see your work and I see you as part of us. And I see you with all of those amazing women, and all of their ancestors and all of our ancestors. And I love the way you've done that with this installation. There's the reflection, take a look at it. So not only is it the art hanging on the wall, but our women are reflected on the floor as well because of the way the lighting happens in that space. And so I really appreciate that about this particular exhibition, and thank all of you, because it really does reflect well this whole spirit of representation, and she's not putting herself out there as the CHamoru who represents all of us. She comes with this cultural humility that you've allowed her to share with the world and to model to others, reminding all of us that she is not, it's not just about her, it's about all of us. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm just gonna bring everybody with me everywhere we go. So.
And we are about at time now. So we'll thank all of you for being here. Tyler, did you want to?
No, I was about to applaud.
Oh, do we have time for one more question? Okay. See the hand up in the back?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. This question is for Gisela. I just have to say, I'm not CHamoru, but I am Polynesian, and I totally feel represented in your art, and I love it totally. I'm fixated on how you paint their faces, and there's markings on there. I'm not sure if that's a CHamoran motif, but can you speak about the markings on the faces on your series?
Yeah, it's not CHamoru. I've been looking at Pacific Islander masks lately in the newer work, but it actually came from when I was in Detroit and I would sit with somebody. We would do sheet masks, like the face mask. We'd like drink tea and just chat. And I was taking that texture, or the shape of the the sheet mask, and putting this like ski mask texture on it, because I was playing with doing these portraits of myself with a ski mask on it. That's something that kind of creates more, makes you anonymous, right? So this hybrid between being anonymous and healing. And so I kind of created this thing, and all those paintings at the beginning were, the voices were altered and the faces were covered. So as the work became more international or moved around a little bit, and also like talking to the people in the portraits and realizing like we want to tell our stories, and a big part of the audio too is talking about what people are proud of themselves for and what does a safe world look like. So I kind of started letting the markings fade away because we wanted to see our faces, and I wanted people to recognize themselves. So it's kind of just an ode to that, this layer of protection between the subject and the person, the viewer. And the last question I usually ask for the audio too is, what would you say to a stranger, like who's looking at you? And people don't always know what to say because it's a weird question. But thinking about again, these boundaries, and I think about that final boundary as the voice in the space, and the next one's the mask, and the next one's the objects, and then the person's there. And then there's their space and their home and the jungle and our relationship and our like time together. So making sure there's kind of like a sandwich between the person and the stranger, and not just throwing them out into the world, making sure they have autonomy wherever they go. But yeah, no, a lot of people think the mask is like a CHamoru mask, but I just made it up.
That's a great question. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gisela, for being here. Let's give her a round of applause. For spending this hour with us, and we wish you the best. Enjoy the weekend, and thank you so much to the Triennial organizers and to HoMA for this space. Mahalo. Have a good evening.